Hey 3DMJers, this is Andrea Valdez, and you're listening to the 3D Muscle Journey podcast. Today, you'll be hearing two of our head coaches, Brad Loomis and Brian Miner, along with our team's mental health consultant and specialist, Amanda Rizzo, discuss how to deal with the anxieties and stresses that come along with competing. Whether it's the final few weeks before meet day giving you imposter syndrome, your inability to sleep the night before you get on stage, or the game day jitters that come out and keep you from your best performance when it matters most, they've covered it all in this episode. And even if you don't have competitive ambitions related to your physique or strength at the moment, maybe these kinds of emotional roadblocks come up when you're testing your 1RM at the gym, or about to give a big presentation at work, or trying to muster up the courage for any other big shift in life. The ideas and principles in this show can help you show up in a more calm and confident way, and we can't wait for you to listen. As always, if you have any feedback or comments on this particular episode, head on over to 3dmusclejourney.com or our YouTube channel at youtube.com/team3dmj and leave it under podcast number 228. Let's get into it. Here is Becoming a Self-Aware Competitor with Amanda Rizzo, Brian Miner, and Brad Loomis.
Okay, so you guys, I have a bit of a confession, and a little bit of backstory to this. I think it was either last year or the year before. I remember Alberto. He needed to be talked off the ledge because he was having a bit of a freak out as he was getting ready for prep, and I didn't understand it at the time. It was kind of one of those deals where you're like, oh, I don't think something had progressed like he thought it would, and he's dropped some weight and I remember that I wasn't in on the conversation, but he basically needed to be talked off the ledge because he was freaking out, that he didn't progress on something that he thought that he did. And lo and behold, a year and a half later, I'm practicing my posing a little bit and looking at my camera here where I do all of my coaching. And I'm like, oh my God, where are my delts? I have no delts. I can't prep. I can't, I'm done. Let's go. Let's start building the delts, And it was a legitimate freak out. It was like, I can't get on stage like this. I have no caps. I'm like, where did my caps go? And I literally had to kind of take a break, and I kind of had to look at my old photos, and I'm like, okay, no, wait a minute, Brad. Let's be rational here. You've got a lot more body fat. There's a lot of areas that need to shrink below your delts, like around your biceps, and your triceps, that area that shrinks, that makes your delts look bigger. And I'm like, you need to kind of calm down here a little bit and just keep running with this. And then luckily Alberto, he was kind enough to kind of talk me off the ledge a little bit. He's like, I'm just kind of looking forward, Brad, to watching you have fun again. Because, I remember way back in the day before you had the pressure of winning or losing and, didn't have any expectations that you were trying to pull. You just had a good time. You just had a ball, And I'm like, yeah, that's what I need to be thinking about, And I'm like, and this is 51-year-old Brad, this is not 44-year-old Brad that's going to be getting on stage. So it mellowed me out, But I just made me think how many times our athletes are probably the same way, They probably have freakouts many, many times, not even counting when they actually get on stage. So, yeah, I was a little bit, I was like ready to ring Amanda and say, Amanda, help me. What do I do here?
Yeah. My first question was going to be, did you find them? Did you find those caps?
What?
Are they doing okay?
Yeah, they were there, It's just They didn't look like I wanted them to,
Yeah, and I think an important aspect to recognize whenever we have a freak out like that, whether or not it's during competition season or off season, is ask ourselves or really inquire what it really is that we're freaking out about. Because it might not actually just be, we lose our caps or we're not as tight or whatever it is. So that's kind of like the first part. We want to see if it's coming from a place of actual insecurity, and also identify if it's a continued pattern. Are we always constantly looking for what's wrong, what's missing, what's not enough? Or are we actually just enjoying the process and seeing like, oh, okay, this is an area that I want to improve in and want to build upon because I'm an athlete. This is something that I want to do long term versus, oh shoot, this means something about me.
Yeah,
So I
I
don't know,
wonder.
Brad, if you can share about that, or Brian.
I was just gonna say, like, I think I'm trying to. I mean, I think first of all, I think it's normal. I think that's very common. And I think in your shoes, Brad, it's like just you've been in this game long enough where you know that there's going to be days that maybe you don't look as full, or there's going to be days that are like misleading in terms of data, you know? And so, I mean, I've had plenty of days like that where like it doesn't bother me as much anymore because within a week it just feels like the pendulum can swing the other direction, you know? So, um, that's the biggest thing. But I like what Amanda said with, sort of identifying maybe what the root issue is, and whether that's okay if I compete and my delts aren't as big, which probably only you would notice anyway. Is that going to impact like my if you're doing this professionally, as a coach, like is that going to impact credibility? Like there's I think a trickle down effect that comes down to I think pride in what we do, and I think that's potentially a part of it. I think I mean, I've had those thoughts. Like I've been dealing with on and off knee issues for, since last prep. And it's like, okay, do I want to, like in the back of my mind, it's like, do I want to step on stage if my quads aren't better, or if my legs aren't better? Um, but ultimately it's like what motivates me to get on stage is just the process and the fulfillment along the way. And I think there's a lot of aspects that have improved, and I also think I'm probably being unrealistic in the fact that I probably have made some progress there. Um, but I think when things aren't firing on all cylinders, it's easy to kind of focus on that one variable and um, can inadvertently disregard all of the other excitement that kind of goes with the process.
And Brian, when you mean things aren't firing on all cylinders, is that things going according to plan, or
Yeah,
more
no,
so just the
yeah, I mean,
experience
like
of prep itself?
it's, I guess, like let's use a parallel of like a power lifter. Like it's pretty rare, and Brad, maybe this will resonate with you. It's pretty rare for like a power lifter for like all three lifts to just be going phenomenally. Someone usually it's like, okay, like my squat and my bench are doing well, like my deadlift, like what the hell's going on? Like I need to figure this out. And it's easy to kind of get down on yourself and look past all of the other things that are going well. And in the process, you realize things just kind of turn around anyway. Like more often than not, you do figure it out, and your deadlift might come up and then your squat might struggle. So I think it's finding comfort in those periods where things aren't like linear in all facets.
Yeah, because the first thing that I kind of thought about as I was going through this freak out, I was like, this reminds me of like the very first time that I was stepping on stage. I was worried that I was not going to have abs. I was worried that I was not going to be lean enough. And we hear that all the time. With our athletes that are stepping on stage for the first time, they're self-conscious about a little bit of excess body fat here or some excess skin there, or kind of whatever. And I had to literally kind of put my coach's hat and kind of talk to myself in a way, and it's like when we experience that with our athletes, we're like, you know what? First of all, what we have to do is we have to eliminate comparison, because what you're kind of doing to yourself there is you're comparing yourself to people that have already been on stage, or people that you've been on stage and that you've seen and have preconceived notions of how you need to look as, compared to them, and we have to just kind of think, okay, this is a competition that's you against you. This is going to be your lifetime best shape that you have ever been in. You're going to achieve things that you didn't think that you would ever achieve, during this, And so I think there's that kind of inherent self-consciousness when you're doing something for the first time, you know, which I think is important to recognize. And you just got to kind of keep returning back to that all the time because it just keeps popping up. And I'm sure that this is not going to be the last time that I'm going to have this little freak out about my delts. You know, it's gonna be a kind of a recurring thing. But yeah, I actually like what you said too, Amanda, that I just need to kind of say, okay, where is this coming from? First of all, you know, what is making this thing kind of keep popping up in my head, you know, and kind of recognize that more so than anything. And then number two, ironically, I was just looking at myself the other day. And I'm like, oh, wow, look at my lats. Because I have a wide waist and I don't have really good symmetry because of that wide waist. And my lats looked wider than they ever have. And if I would have been just focusing right there on my delts, you know, I would have missed all of those pluses that we were talking about. I would have missed my squat making some big strides because my deadlift was faltering a little bit by focusing on that, you know. But yeah, I really like what you had to say there because it was just one of those things where this natural evolution of me actually noticing my actual improvements at this stage too. And that's kind of the other thing is like, I'm seeing athletes that are getting ready to compete here like in a matter of months. And of course they have really good caps. They're lean, you know? And I'm looking at myself going, you know, and I'm still a long ways away. We're talking months and months and months, you know, if not a year. And so I was kind of falling trapped to that comparison, you know?
Yeah, and I think that touches on the whole topic about comparison because we typically focus more so externally, but we can also compare ourselves to just the previous day and maybe how we looked last prep. And that's a trap in and of itself as well, because like you pointed in regards to like you focusing on your delts solely, we're not looking at the whole picture. It's like we're hyper fixating on just one small detail versus taking in the entire fractal, if you will, or the entire story. And that creates a lot of tension in us. And it creates a lot of just resistance and feeling stuck and looping. And really all we want to do is let go. But that's terrifying in and of itself because it's the unknown. And so I think that's just more so like an existential point. But I mean, it applies to just the process of competing. We don't know what's going to happen during the prep or peak week or even just training throughout it because it just feels scary, even though it's exciting and something that we deliberately chose to do. It's still something that's going to stretch us and push our comfort zone.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Brad.
well, I was just going to say that looping that you mentioned. Say that because like I told you, it's going to happen again. I'm going to freak out
It's going to
again.
happen again.
You
It's
know,
a pattern.
Yeah. And I kind of, through experience and of course now through talking to you, I've kind of got a bit of a strategy on how to overcome that. But what else could you share on that, you
Yeah,
know?
absolutely. So it's a pattern. It's not necessarily something about you. It's a behavior pattern and it's a mechanism, if you will, like a coping mechanism to deal with the stress. And we can see that more so as a signpost, you know, like on the car dashboard, it's the blinking lights letting you know, hey, something's up. And if we could create like almost like a healthy detachment from that, instead of being completely consumed in, oh my gosh, like I don't look good or I need a quick prep because I'm just not going to make it. Because that's also as like catastrophic thinking, black and white thinking. We want to like take a step back and figure out, is this something first based on reality? Because our emotions are valid, but they're most often not based on reality, especially if it's coming from that stressful point. So taking a step back and kind of like chilling out for a moment and also recognizing that our body in and of itself is stressed and our thinking capacity is limited when the body is dysregulated. So we want to attend to that before we try to kind of like reason and rationalize with the challenge, with the behavior pattern.
I
Is
think
that
it's hard
clear?
with. Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think it's hard too, just the nature of this sport. Like one thing I've thought about,
Yeah.
is early on, like in my, early 20s, when it's like you're focused on just improvement, and I think as you progress across your career, you see like masters competitors that are, competing, in their best physique might be behind them, but they're still competing because they love the like all of the other good that comes with the fulfillment of that process. And so like I've noticed that shift, personally, like there's aspects that probably, next time I compete may not be quite as good, um but like that I still love the sport, and I think it in a sport that's very subjective like this, and it's bodybuilding, not mitigating body shrinking. It's like it can be challenging. So I think it's especially challenging with something like a contest prep. But um yeah, for me it's focusing on like all of the other things that are going well. And to kind of go back to like the powerlifting aspect, it's like if your deadlift's down but your total is up, then it's like the big picture is better, like
Right.
your net, it's a net positive. And I think when it comes to bodybuilding, like it extends simply beyond like hypertrophy. There's other avenues that you can maximize. You see people all the time where like they may not put on much muscle between each off season, but wow, like they learned how to pose finally, and
Mhm.
so things like that, like there's like you're placing, in whatever stock you put in that, it's like it's it's the expression of, dozens of components, and off-season delts, which are notorious for not being, like they're the body part that like does look bigger as you prep because that's so easy to mask. I think it's like that's not a concern for you, Brett. You'll be good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and really, to be honest with you, I can kind of see now in reflection, this is kind of something that probably stemmed from something a strategy that I used to use a lot. When I was younger. If I had angst about something, if something was making me nervous, it was for me, the way that I would deal with that is like, okay, well, you know what you need to do then is you need to make up strategy to overcome that, or to put that angst, to bed, kind of, so to speak. And this is kind of where I want to take this conversation now, but getting back to to Brad dealing with his delts is that was one of the things that kind of bothered me is I went to that place. We need to do something about this to put this to bed, right? And in order for me to do that, I can't do that when I'm prepping. I can't work on improving that as I'm prepping. I can't work on, I got to have everything perfect in order to make improvement on that. And that was kind of the first place that I kind of went to, just out of that habit, in my past. But we're not talking about, being nervous about posing and getting up on stage, something in the short term, right? If you're nervous about posing, you need to practice. That's the bottom line. You need to do something soon, if not now, to prepare yourself so that you're not nervous, And so that's kind of where I wanted to kind of take this conversation is you got to use those, like you said, with the blinking light, man. It's like, if I see a blinking light on my dashboard that says that my oil pressure is low, that's a trigger that I should probably put, oil in the car or something. I better attend to that. You know what I
Maybe.
mean?
Some
So that's
people
kind of
procrastinate it.
exactly. And that's kind of where I want to go with that is how do we, obviously in these last few weeks, the way that Brad was kind of wanting to deal with this, to put this to rest and deal with this angst it wasn't the positive way to do it, and differentiating that from, okay, well, you know what, I'm nervous about my posing. I'm nervous about not being ready, and using that in a positive way, kind of in the short term, right? Coming up with a strategy that's gonna help you to deal with that particular angst that you're having.
Yeah. I can't personally say from experience of how I've dealt with being on stage because I have not.
Uh-huh.
Although the concept in general is a matter of first recognizing what power do I have in this situation, recognizing can I do anything about it that's within my capacity versus what's completely out of your hands. Like if it's just someone comes up with a, freak physique, okay. So first identifying those things. And if there's actually still fear and anxiety around posing in and of itself, we want to investigate what's going on there. And if we can actually sit with that discomfort, because if we just tackle just taking action, we're not really recognizing possibly any blind spots that we have and avoidance coping mechanisms, because the mind is it's very sneaky and it wants to protect us from just general discomfort and pain, but it can keep us in those same loops like we've talked
Okay.
about earlier. So in general, having just more so of a curious mindset, curious approach about what's going on there, and then actually taking action. Because the way to work through a lot of just insecurities and resistance towards things is to move within your own limits, your own capacity, not just forcing yourself, inching your way towards that place that you do want to be. And also identifying your values and identifying why you want to do it in the first place.
Ugh.
Yeah.
Yeah, because ultimately that's what I kind of had to do. It's like you're not doing this to have, Alberto Nunez delts or Jeff Albert's delts. You're doing this because you wanted to prep. You wanted to be a little bit hungry. You wanted to go through something you haven't gone through in a long time. And you wanted to utilize some of the strategies that you've never been able to utilize before. And that was kind of one of the things that kind of talked me off the ledge there, a little bit. But question for you, Brian, because you've probably had to deal with this. It's kind of like, okay, when do we actually pull out? When do we say, okay, we're not doing this? I've had a few, but like I've never really coached somebody through the kind of anxiety like I'm talking about now with me with my delts, or with Berto with whatever it was that he was like, I didn't progress there. When would you say, okay, now we need to kind of think about getting away from this?
I think it goes back to kind of what Amanda was saying with the values and like why, like sitting with this question for a while, like why am I wanting to prep to begin with? And if the answer is solely like, okay, I want to beat my previous physique, which obviously that's always a goal. But if it's like, okay, do I want to compete? Do I want to, given what, I've experienced in past preps and, all the other good that can come with it, like what will dictate like this mission being successful for me? And for some people, I think it's like you shouldn't, like you should never prep because of somebody else, like, or like this feeling of pressure to prep. Like, because people, like they, as much as they love seeing, their coach or, an athlete that they follow on social media, as much as they enjoy following that process, like you're only going to reach your potential if you're engaged in it, like prep is one of those things you can't really like do halfway, I think, and get what you want out of it. So I think, the answer to that's different for everybody. The one big like red flag for me is if an athlete, comes to me and says like, I want to prep next year and I want to win this show. And like, you get the feeling that their definition of success is only around like the placing. Like that is a big red flag because like there's a high likelihood that may not happen, because of there's so many factors outside of our control. So for me, it goes back to like, okay, what's within my control or an individual's control, and how can we manage that, or can we manage that in a way that they can get to the finish line and feel like this was a productive and, positive experience. So, if there's somebody who's, they're wanting to prep and, they've got like a world caliber physique and like they're prepping to compete amongst the best, but they're, let's say they tore their ACL 2 years prior, and they're still like picking up the pieces and kind of getting back to that point. Like their finish line and their definition of success is going to be different than somebody who's just starting out. And I think as coaches, we have to, I think sometimes people like novices will start a prep with a definition of success and they might end with a different definition.
Mm-hmm.
Because oftentimes things, placings aside, I mean, I placed like 8th at my first show, but I wanted to do better, obviously, but I realized, okay, these are the things I learned along the way. These are now things within my control that I can plan ahead for and improve upon. So I don't know if that really answers the question, but I think it's very context dependent on like what's driving that individual, at the start. And I think I'm more inclined to talk somebody out of a prep if I feel like they're doing it for the wrong
reasons.
Yeah.
Mm.
So I'm curious to know what both of your processes have been in terms of your definition of success and if it's shifted at all.
Yeah, I think for me, to be honest, I've never gone into a prep like measuring success on placings. And I've told this, to some of my athletes. It's like my 2017 prep was, the best I've looked, but placing wise was significantly worse than like 2012. But I felt like I had finally kind of refined my process at that point, and things were like I was happy with the strategy that I had put together and in the physique that I had brought. So the placings have never really meant much to me because I just look at that as like a byproduct of how well, one, your genetics and just how well you execute your plan, which, for a lot of, or for most competitors, I think it's just giving ample time to get in shape. Like I think most people have gotten to the point where like my second prep, the goal going into that was like, I don't want that anxiety of whether or not I'm going to be ready in time, and I think some of that inevitably can kind of creep in, but the solution to that, like that's manageable. It's like, give yourself an ample timeline, maybe give yourself an open-ended timeline where it's like, okay, I'm committed to this goal, but I don't want a date staring me in the face 25 weeks out. I'm going to I'm going to compete when I'm ready. And so then it becomes less about like, am I going to be ready for this show versus like, when am I going to be ready for this show? So I think it reframing it in that context, I think kind of helped me. But I don't know if that's for everybody, because I think some people may need a date to kind of commit to the process. And so, but if like, no matter what, I'm going to compete, then I think, especially for first-time competitors, giving yourself an ample timeline is important, because most people don't. Like there's plenty of muscular physiques that, I mean, how many times, Brad, have we heard like that guy would be really good if he had like 3 or 4 more weeks of dieting, and that's like within their control. I mean, they might not have known it at the time, but in a follow-up prep, it's just like, for me now, like the motivation is like, let's see how much I can refine the process and get from point A to point B in an efficient manner with, it being the least invasive on my lifestyle as I can, given what the goal is anyway.
Hey everyone, this is Andrea Valdez popping in real quick to tell you all about our latest course in the 3DMJ Vault titled Personalizing Your Program. This course was made by our Chief Science Officer, Eric Helms, and it's honestly the entire foundation of how to assess, create, and manage training programs for bodybuilders, powerlifters, and serious lifters of all types. Eric will spend the first few chapters teaching you about the 3 pillars of training adherence and how not considering any one of them will lead to decreased performance or results. In the last half of the course, we'll give you insights and advice on how to manage your program through life stressors while participating in other types of non-lifting activity, what to do when you miss a workout as an off-season athlete, how to handle missed workouts as a competitor with a deadline, and how to conceptualize goal management and injuries. The course is full of the advice that nobody really wants to hear until they've run into problems, can't stick to their training schedule, have ruined relationships, or fallen short of the plans that they had for themselves. It's the backbone of every athletic career, and it's what we wish athletes knew before ever lifting their first weight. But since most people skip these steps or lessons, it's where most setbacks in progress or confidence can happen. We know this course will serve as a solid foundation or a solid set of reminders for lifters of all levels, and we can't wait for you guys to take it. Personalizing Your Program is now the 19th course in the 3DMJ Vault, which is our online learning platform of organized video-based education for serious lifters. You can become a VIP member to access every single one of our courses for just $16.99 per month or $79.99 per year. This means that once you complete this foundational course, you'll have access to everything else you'll need to build your own training program with these lessons in mind. You'll have access to our Quick Start PDF guide, along with the entire 40-plus videos in the lifting library so you can select the right exercises to fit your newly built training plan. VIP members will also get access to our suite of nutrition setup courses as well, such as the Calculating Your Calories course, the Calculating Your Macros course, the Sustainable Fat Loss course, and many more. Go to 3dmjvault.com and sign yourself up today. That's 3dmjvault.com to get all access. Thanks so much for listening and enjoy the rest of the show.
My answer to your question, Amanda, is super convoluted. And it's basically that way because I've always, my whole life, been a competitive person. My whole life. And I've always competed in sports where there was a clear-cut winner, If it was running a race, there was somebody that placed first and second and third. I raced cars, And I remember as a young, probably late teen, early 20-year-old saying, I am never going to compete in any sport where there is not a clear-cut winner. I'm not going to compete in any sport where somebody else determines, my placing. It's going to be, I ran the fastest time. I threw the furthest. I completed the laps the quickest before everybody else. And then lo and behold, in 2003, I'm competing in bodybuilding.
Joke's
right?
on you.
Yeah.
But yeah, with that being said, early in my career, I was friggin' spoiled, and I did focus on placing, and eventually my bubble was burst, because of that. I showed up to my first show. Nobody had ever seen anybody that lean ever. I was competing against the pro, basically. I wasn't on stage with him, but they were saying, you could compete with that guy. You could stand up there with that guy. Next year, kind of the same thing. I won my show, and basically I was spoiled because all I had to do was get shredded. That was the thing in my control. I had to diet hard, get shredded, and if I got up there on stage, I was going to win. I was probably going to win my class, at a minimum. And then, of course, going for the overall. That, to me, if I won the overall, it was kind of like a bonus. I just wanted to win my class. And then of course 2006 happens, and I come up against Mr. Jeffrey Alwarts. And then all of a sudden, now it's kind of like I get this realization of, hey, this is not a guarantee, and I got to kind of start thinking more so about this subjective sport and what is the definition of success, versus winning, et cetera, et cetera. But then, of course, I took 2007 off just to kind of improve, and then 2008, by that time I had forgotten about it, and I'm back to the Brad that wants to show up to win. All I got to do is show up and get shredded, and I'll win. And then that was all reinforced. And I remember vividly in 2008, no, I'm sorry, it was 2009 because Eric was competing. Because let's see, I won my pro card in 2008, and then Jeff won it in 2009. Yeah, so it was 2009. Eric was going to these shows where he knew Jeff was going to be at, and it was like, I remember thinking to myself, why is he even doing that? He's not going to beat Jeff. And I admired him for it. He was competing knowing that he was not going to win, the overall, but it was in my mind. It's like, why is he even doing that? I wouldn't even be doing that show. I would be targeting some other show, but it was because the competitive Brad that was thinking placing and thinking winning the pro card, and even to this day, that sometimes when I hear I want to win my pro card, or I want to win this show, it's kind of a red flag for me, because once I got into the pro ranks, that's when Brad's bubble was burst, and I remember my first pro show, it was kind of like I was almost bawling because I knew I was not in contention. I was not one of those guys in the middle, that they were looking at. And really the next few years was rough, because of just that reason. There was no way Brad was going to compete like in the pros like he did in the amateurs, and even to this day, Brad couldn't compete with a lot of the amateurs, that are out there, and so that whole definition of success is totally changed. It's totally changed, Did I even answer the question? I'm just sitting there talking about stories. Yeah, and where is it now? I mean, for me personally, like we talked about earlier, I'm not even really thinking competing. I'm thinking prepping. That's what we're doing right now, is prepping. Brad wants to go through the prep process, and I'm super early in the stages, and I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying overcoming being hungry and being tired and getting in there and still doing having a good session, and then defining what that good session is, So I've come a long way since the guy that kind of focused on placing, But I mean, that word compete, I wrote that down because that still is it's a tricky thing, because the competitive Brad is like, okay, if you want to win your pro card, we need to target, let's say that I'm dealing with an athlete that's really earlier in the career. They've got a good physique, but that's their emphasis, is winning their pro card. It's kind of like, okay, no guarantees here, obviously, but what we should probably do, if that's your emphasis, is maybe we target these smaller shows, where you're not going to be going up against the freaks, or at least the freaks aren't going to be looking at these shows, and you've got a pretty good chance of actually competing and winning your pro card, and I have clients to this day that are kind of like, do I even have a chance at competing? And it's like, that's such a tricky word in this sport,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just, that's kind of a tough thing, because there's always that competing that's in there, but you have no control over where your placing is, I mean, sure, we could target these shows to where your chance of actually competing and winning is better, but there's still no guarantee, and this might be a multi-year process. And then, of course, we've all been there. I've hit, kind of like smaller shows, and my very first overall, it was like I was competing against 3 guys in my class and 2 in the overall. There's like 5 whole bodybuilders there. And yeah, I won my overall, but it didn't really feel very good. It's like, okay, I won, how much did I really compete? So yeah, so that word compete, it's such a tricky thing, especially when you are a competitive person competing in this sport.
Yeah. I think it can be looked at like competing against other people versus like competing against yourself, and it's like, as cliche as that sounds. I like to pose the question to people. It's like, okay, if you, let's say someone's competed before, would you rather, like, this upcoming prep, like if you had to pick one, which one of these would you pick with, okay, you could either place first and win every show, but be at like 80% of your potential, or place dead last and have emptied the tank and feel like, okay, I couldn't have shown up looking any better. And I think for me, it's like I would go with the second option 10 out of 10 times, because it's that competition kind of within that I think drives really great competitors. Not putting myself up in that category, but it's like, I think that's what's necessary though, to really show up looking the way you want, season after season. It's managing the variables that are within my control. And I think sometimes another follow-up question, like Brad, you said, you have athletes that ask like, okay, I want to win my pro card. It's sometimes it's uncomfortable for me, like as a coach, to ask this because I don't want it to come across the wrong way. But like getting into like, why do you want to win your pro card? Like what value are you assigning to that and why? Because it certainly doesn't come with any financial reward. Like, is it a matter of like how you would view yourself or
Yes.
how you feel like you would be perceived by others? Because I think that's important to, and if it does come down to like, okay, I feel like I will be a failure if I don't win my pro card. Well, what if you get in the best shape of your life? Like, how is that not a huge success? So kind of getting, to kind of circle back to what Amanda was saying, like getting to their, like the value and why they have those values surrounding their goal.
Yeah, Brian, you actually touched on something that I wanted to connect with Brad in terms of competing. The word competing in general is just our own self-assessment, whether it's comparing ourselves externally or internally. Are we basing just our relationship with ourselves and just what compassion and capacity we have towards ourselves if we make a mistake or we place last or we place first? Are we basing it just on these variables that can just change moment to moment to moment? Or are we just providing space for ourselves to be human, first of all, not just machines that accomplish things and collect all of these successes? Which, yes, then we want to look at why we're doing it in the first place. What are we gaining from? What are we learning in the process as just a being versus this machine and capitalism of being successful? And I think a lot of us avoid digging into that because we do get a lot of external validation when we are successful, or we just do a competition. And even if we place last, like our family and our friends they're really supportive and we look freaking shredded. But it's fleeting. It's always fleeting. And that kind of leads to, I think, the next part of like post-show blues. What happens afterwards? Like, okay, you might have won or you might have completely tanked it and you feel empty afterwards. So that's kind of another cue towards why did you do it in the first place? Or were you even present throughout the entire experience that you kept, looking forward to or pointing your fantasy or your mind's eye towards, and you weren't in it at all. Like you weren't present in it at all. And I think a lot of us do that just outside of bodybuilding.
Gosh, it's this conversation has taken such a different turn, from kind of where I envisioned it. But it's one thing I feel like to prepare for competition, and then it's kind of like another thing to compete, right? Because I mean, competing is such a harsh thing. You're either going to win or you lose, and everybody loves winners, And like you guys were saying, it's like, what are we focused on there? Are we focused on competing? Or are we focused on getting ready to compete? Because obviously, if we're trying to be good at anything, we've got to prepare. We've got to practice, But I mean, ultimately, there's the reality that there are winners and there are losers, and that's kind of a hard thing to kind of grasp, And I kind of talk about a lot. I use that term, being comfortable with being uncomfortable, and let's face it, the reality is that you're going to have to sit with losing at some point, you know? And the only thing that you really have is that you prepare yourself, you practice, you get yourself ready, and then ultimately you just do your best. And then what happens, and you don't put a whole lot of weight into whether you were the winner or the loser, or you were second or third, or you were fourth, or kind of whatever, which kind of circles back to our being ready, our dealing with our anxiety of being ready and the nervousness that comes along with it. You know what I mean? Amanda, would you say that that's where kind of we need to make our emphasis is the preparation and enjoying the preparation, and kind of that's where we need to kind of put all of our emphasis?
I would say not the only thing, but I think it's a very important aspect of it, being with our own process and continuing to touch back to why we're doing it, all of our values that align with this decision. And also, I want to kind of like push the concept around, like, if I lose, it's good. I mean, if I lose, it's bad, or I win and it's good. Because if we remove those labels, we'll always win. And especially if we're present throughout it, and if we're not basing our success externally and success towards this just hierarchical label. If we're just allowing ourselves to grow and take in the experience, then I believe that we're always going to win.
Yeah. Yeah, I think if you're present for the process, it's like you can't have the outcome, like the competitive outcome, without like exhausting the process. So it's, yeah, I think for the way I look at it is if somebody, wants to win a show, it's like, okay, great. Like, let's put that in the back of your mind. Like, where are we at now and what do we need to do to put you in a position to maybe do that? And I think if you can go to bed every night knowing that like you've managed the variables within your control during a prep, like the anxiousness is going to be significantly less when it comes to competing. Like you said, Brad, it's like if you're nervous about getting up on stage and posing, it's probably because you need more practice doing it. It's like anything that you're good at, you usually aren't nervous, like at a paralyzing anxiety, It's like you can have nerves, but
Right.
like it should be something, with bodybuilding and sports like powerlifting. Like I tell the powerlifters that I work with, it's like, okay, on meet day, like we're not loading anything that is like a far fetch, like this is like all of the work has been done. Like all you're doing is displaying the effort that you've been putting in over the past, 12 to 16 weeks, whatever it is. And I think the same thing goes for prep. It's like if you've, exhausted your potential and manage those variables during the prep itself, then competing should be fun. Like I think, and that's something that's shifted in my mind too. It's like there's still aspects like I want to improve on. But I've enjoyed competing more each time I've done it because the prep itself has been more efficient. So I think for me, I'm like a huge proponent of like focus on the process before the outcome. And this is kind of, it just popped into my head. I was visiting my mom a couple weeks ago in Arizona, and she plays pickleball, and she was asking me like, what do you think, like competitiveness, like what does that mean if somebody's like really competitive? Like, cause she says, I don't like losing, like, or she said, I like winning, but like the other day, we lost a match, or, a while back, like I could lose a match and it's just like, whatever, but there's other people that are really like devastated by it, And so she's like looking for these, mental tips on competitiveness. And And I think she said, I hadn't thought of this before. She said, do you think competitive people, it's a sign of like feeling like they're lacking in terms of some aspect of self-esteem? And I said, well, I think that can be the case, but then I think there's other people that are just built for a sport, like Kobe Bryant, somebody who's like, I think he gets upset when he loses because he knows like he could have won, like he could have done something and, emptied the tank in some capacity that maybe he hadn't in order to get that, that win. So I think that competitiveness aspect, like, is this trying to solve something, a perception of myself? Or is this something like, okay, I know I'm good at this and I want to, and obviously it can be a combination of both, but, I want to express my full potential because I know it can be competitive.
Yeah, it's not to necessarily say that we need to be like blasé about winning or losing, like, oh, I don't care. We want to evaluate, we want to hold ourselves accountable. And, I agree with someone that's like a huge athlete. They have the self-awareness that, oh, maybe I slacked off here or there, and I could have done something differently because it is still within their capacity. It's not necessarily something that's just completely off the mark. And they're also doing it productively. They're not tearing themselves down. They're not like degrading themselves. They're not, like self-deprecating their overall self-worth and their self-view. They're using it constructively and pointing more towards what they can do moving forward versus just like constantly ruminating on, oh, I coulda, shoulda, would've. But okay, it didn't happen. What are you going to do now? Like, you have this moment now. What next?
Yeah, I like that.
That's such a hard thing to deal with too, because I always feel really bad when like people are just grilling the losers. You know what I mean? Like, you think about these pro sports, and I mean, these guys, they spend tons of money in their preparation. They go through all of these scenarios, and they've got coaches that drill them on all these different. I mean, they're basically everything they do is to win. And they've literally done everything that they can possibly do. To win. And then, of course, there's always a winner and a loser. And then there's those people. There's the scrutiny. There's the judges that are like, well, what would you have done different? That everybody loves winners. It's just kind of like, I feel bad. I feel bad when these athletes are up there on that podium and they're like, hey, you know what? Normally you do this, and your average passing yards is this, and your average points per game is this, and blah, 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 blah. And it didn't happen in this game. Why? And it's like, what does that athlete do?
Yeah.
I mean, you could challenge that. Why not? It's just what happened.
Exactly. And so I'm kind of like, I'm thinking to myself, it's that almost that fear of failure, that is kind of like something that I feel like we need to kind of deal with. And the positive way to do that is to make sure that you're ready. Make sure that you practice your posing and that you're as lean as you can be, and you've done your dieting, and you've done all your training and et cetera, and make sure that you've done everything you could. Because I feel like if that's the case, at least if you don't have somebody jamming their finger down your throat saying, why didn't you win? Why didn't we, it's kind of like you can sit with being second place better. You know what
Do
I
I
mean?
need
You
to
can
redefine? Oh, sorry.
No, that's what I was just going to say. I feel like if you've done what you were supposed to do, and you've controlled all the variables, and you still didn't win, you can sit with it. It's better. It doesn't feel as bad. You know what I mean?
Right. Because then the definition of failure is different. And I think in general, we might encounter other people because they have different worldviews coming down on us or coming down on athletes for being second place or failing or, losing the Super Bowl, whatever. But they can still, I'm sure we've seen that, they still party, they still celebrate, they still feel great about the accomplishments because to them it's not a failure.
Yeah, exactly. And I think because that's a lot of times what the answers to those questions are. It's like, well, you know what? Just didn't make it happen that day. And then they just walk off the stage. It's like everybody else wants some sort of an accountability, or they want to know the reason why, or what they're going to do to win next time. But a lot of times those athletes that were prepared and they're okay, or they, like you said, Amanda, their definition of failure is different than the people that are pointing their fingers at them. They're okay with you know what, it just didn't happen this day. You know what, it's just in that particular circumstance, it just couldn't make it happen. I tried, I was ready, but I couldn't make it happen. They shifted that definition, just a little bit. And I guess people that judge them don't like that.
I always think it's interesting just kind of talking about pro athletes. I know this isn't the same with every sport, but like I know like LeBron James is like very active on social media, and he's one of, if not the greatest basketball player of all time. But I notice like personally, like in hockey, like the top players in the league, I've always been fascinated by the fact that like none of them are active on social media. And I don't think it's necessarily that they're not like that they don't enjoy it or like see any value of it. I think they're just protecting themselves from that situation. And I think there's a lot of athletes that are like that. It's like, what good is it going to do me? Like if I did a great job, I already know that. Like and my teammates and coaches will tell me I did a great job. Like if I, did something poorly or, missed a block or whatever, whatever sport we're talking about, if they fell short, they already know that too. Like going on and getting that reinforced by the general public, that's
the press,
sitting in their living room. It's like what, like who gives a shit? Like there's no point in doing that. But I think if you're constantly exposed to that, like it can start to kind of rewire the way you kind of look at yourself. But I have noticed, with, a few exceptions, a lot of like high level athletes are pretty tame on social media. And I think a lot of that's just by design.
Yeah. Cause there's always the press that's going to report, this is what happened in the game. And this is the outcome, and this is what so-and-so had to say about it.
The peanut gallery.
Yeah. Like I was listening to, like I like stand-up comedy a lot, and I was listening to one guy, Shane Gillis, who I like a lot, but he was saying like he never reads like YouTube comments. He's like that can be like the death of you as a comedian. Like if he like you can be reading like all this positive, 100 positive, comments, and then like one bad one, and he's like, and I'll cling on to that bad one. And I think that's very easy to do. And so, I forget exactly what he said, but basically it's like he'll put something up and just leave it, and the success will, if things are trending up, he knows like it was a net positive, essentially. Like there's no point in fixating on the one negative comment.
Well, that could lead to just another topic, probably another podcast. Why is it we cling on to this one assessment of someone or one judge, and maybe we're not really allowing in all of the positive recognition that we yearn for so much. So I think that could be just a reflection of how we are with ourselves.
Well, and I think Brad with his delts.
That's why I wasn't sure if you found them.
A lot of good going on though.
Yeah.
You zoomed out, and I think that's something that it can be a takeaway. We want to zoom out from the process and not so much come game day, because it's just one day. And we might have put a lot of effort and time and energy towards that one day, but tomorrow will come. You still got more. What are you going to do moving forward?
Yeah, and that's you kind of took me right where I kind of wanted to go. right? It's kind of like now it's game day. We've done everything that we could. We're appropriately nervous, right? And and this is, I've always found the whole area of like sports psychology so fascinating. I know nothing about it. And part of it is just because I don't really have any experience with it. I've always handled game day pretty good. I've been appropriately nervous, but at the same time, my excitement overcame my nervousness. I was excited to show off what it was that I had been working for. I could not wait to get in front of people and show them, you know what? Wow, look at how fast Brad's car is, I couldn't wait to get out there, and it really kind of overcame that nervousness. But I mean, man, do you deal with that at all with like people that get paralyzed and they've done these things over and over and over again in practice? Andrew and I were talking, off camera about the nervousness of performing. Basically, you've done this 100 times. You can do it in your sleep, but there's the almost paralysis that comes over on game day. Do you have any experience with that at all, or how to overcome that?
I think it touches on what I mentioned just a bit ago of, we put so much time and energy towards this day that we, idealize to some extent, we romanticize. And here it is. And it's like, oh, shoot, we didn't think about what the actual experience would be and how we would show up for it. And then we have just the actual energy around us. And that's a lot to take in. It's a lot of pressure, a lot of moving parts. The day is nonstop and it's exhausting. So there are a lot of elements, a lot of factors that come into play. And so, I mean, just as a human being, we can get paralyzed. It's a stressful environment. So that brings us also back to just taking a pause, taking a step back, and trying to chill out and relax, ground yourself in some way, because it's just a stage. It's just lights on you. Just regular old people. They're not bigger and better than you. They might be physically bigger or smaller, but it's just another human being, even though it might be a whole stage of people or a whole audience. And people go there to want to see everyone succeed to some capacity. In general, I think people want everyone to succeed. So having that in mind, and also having that for yourself, like holding yourself throughout the process, or versus just like extending that power externally.
Yes.
Because Brad, when you said like, I want to show off, I think more so that we want to show off to ourselves.
Exactly.
And so being present throughout the process, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's scary, even if those nerves are there, if we can be with it versus just like pushing it away and avoiding it or playing it off. Like, okay, yeah, I'm nervous right now. And just allowing yourself to be in it, allowing yourself to experience this day that you've been wanting to finally get to. Yeah.
One thing that I've often thought about is like how would you recommend somebody who's well prepared? Like you see this like in sports where someone will be great in the regular season and then like they're phenomenal athletes and then playoffs come and they just disappear, It's like, so how do you disassociate like the magnitude of a competition away from like what you're already capable of doing, if that makes sense? So it's
wow, yeah. When you
usually
say like they
competitors
disappear,
well, so they don't perform well. So like, or you'll see somebody, like in bodybuilding, I can't think of any example, like specific examples off the top of my head, but like you'll see professional bodybuilders who, they look awesome like in the qualifying shows, and then things just kind of fall apart at like the Olympia or whatever. Like I would think there's primarily a psychological element to that, where it's like, okay, everything I've been doing up to this point is working. Now, how do I completely disassociate from the magnitude of
bigness,
this event?
of the event,
the scale of what you're about to do. Because on paper, it's like we can say, if you're prepared, just go do your thing. But when the stakes are higher, it can be like you see a lot of people falter there.
Yeah.
And so, like for me, I've always, like any competition I've done, like I've tried to consciously just kind of ignore that aspect. It's like, okay, this is just another one. There's just better competitors, and or whatever. And that seems to have helped me, but I didn't know if you have any tools that the people can maybe use.
What comes to mind is preparation for that, actually. Because if we just do whatever skill, whatever coping mechanism, come day of, when shit hits the fan, we are not going to do it. We're going to do what is well practiced, whether or not it's healthy for us. So if your entire prep, you are thinking, oh, the Olympia, this is the big one. This is the competition that's going to get me to next level or whatever. And you are going to walk into that carrying that weight. But if throughout the process, you're just reframing it, you are defining it for yourself versus this big
stage
function. I think we can start to rewire our perception around it and redefine the magnitude.
Yeah. It's kind of like just tricking yourself out of the significance of the event. And
because it is a hyper focus. It's magnifying it, so it's you're focused on this just one little detail. And again, this another theme here is to zoom out more.
Because you'll see that a lot, like in powerlifting. To me, it's a little bit of a better representation, where in training they can hit these numbers all the time. They show up to their local kind of like a qualifier where they got to get a total to make it to nationals or to whatever, and they do great. It's a small stage, and they exceed their numbers that they usually get. And then, of course, now it's the nationals, or it's worlds, or it's that big day. And for whatever reason, just little things seem to derail them. I've done this squat 1,000 times, and one that comes to mind is I racked it before I got to rack a mat. It's like, why did I do that? And I've hit this load 100 times, and I couldn't do it today, And I think really, to be honest with you, like when I get upset at myself for losing or coming, basically when I do not as good as I thought I was, it wasn't really because I wasn't prepared, or it wasn't because I lost. It's because things didn't go right on game day. I didn't do something right. When I was doing my posing routine, I did that one thing that it was when the variables, when it doesn't go according to plan. I knew that I didn't do what it was that I knew I could do. That's kind of when I get upset, and when I'm not good with losing.
Yeah,
because
and that'll throw you off.
Yeah.
So maybe another skill that we can build upon is not have such rigidity around how things should be, and more so being present and showing up with whatever is happening in the moment and work around it versus attaching to a certain element that needed to go a certain way. Because that just creates stress. And then we keep going back to, oh, it should have been this way, should have been this way. And we're not actually moving forward and being productive.
Yeah, because that's probably the folks that are deemed the most successful is when like you said, they can kind of detach and kind of have different definitions of success. That I think that's probably one of the things that makes really truly successful people really successful, right? So, gosh, I can't think of what else we could talk about here, except to close with this, Amanda, and Brian, you too, because you're an athlete. My son plays football, and 2 years in a row now, they're undefeated. And they have basically been booted out of the league, and they need to move up to the upper conference. And so now they're going to a whole nother level of competition, right? They're no longer in the American division. They're going to the nationals, right? They're bigger schools, bigger athletes. And my son is, he's nervous. He's like, wow, here we've won 21 games in a row. We've got this, recognition from the community, et cetera. And now we're going to be going against the nationals, we're going to be going against bigger schools, and we're probably not going to win as much. And so I said, well, son, does it change anything about how you're going to prepare? Are you going to do anything different, But that was like all I had for him, because it's a team sport, and our sport's very, very individual. So let's have you guys coach me up one last time on how you would help him out.
Well, have fun. Have fun in the process. Enjoy it. And continue reaching back to those values and why you want to do it in the first place.
Yeah, I think in that situation, I mean, it's really no different than what we were talking about. Like you're qualifying for, say the he's like kind of moving to the Olympia in a way.
Mm-hmm.
It's like he's moving up a level. And I think an easy trap could be the comparison of, okay, these are bigger, oftentimes stronger athletes. And I think there's something to be said. Like a point we keep driving home is, the preparation aspect. But I do think getting into like a bigger pool, it's like you sort of rise, like your capacity, like you still want to focus on preparation, but like leverage that opportunity to like increase your capacity for preparation. It's like now it's like, okay, these are all maybe some additional details that I thought I was going 100% on. Like now there's some other aspects that you start to realize, like these are other avenues that I can express to a larger degree now that, I'm kind of, it's like your capacity sort of rises with the tide. And then you just have to express that through your actions at that point. But
right. And I think that also lends to something that we want to do, if that's the case, is to acknowledge that we are there. We are there for a reason. Like, we've been invited to this other league or next level because we might potentially have that capacity.
Yeah, they've earned that position that they put themselves in.
Yeah.
They've earned the anxiety.
The pressure.
All right, you guys. Well, I mean, I'm good. Do we need to discuss anything else? Anything else that we missed on?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I'm very happy with it. And thanks you guys for talking Brad off the ledge on his delts and helping me to coach my athlete son. And thank you for your time as always.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.